Jaguars mandatory minicamp has come and gone. And I thought on today's show it would be a good time to go over all the depth charts just to kind of give a place as to where things kind of stack up for some Jaguars players that are currently maybe fighting for roster spots, maybe fighting for starting positions. Whatever the case may be, we're going to go through every position all the way from quarterback to special teams and discuss where I think things sit as we currently sit here today on June 24th. Now, again, things can change when it comes to training camp, but we'll get to there when we get to there. This episode of Jags Now is presented by our wonderful friends over at PrizePicks. Make sure you use code HMA to get $50 in lineups whenever you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks is our wonderful sponsor here. Go give them a look if you have any daily fantasy concerns. And without any further ado, let's get into the first depth chart of the episode, and it's none other than the quarterback position. Now, Trevor Lawrence, it's not even a discussion. He's your QB1. He's coming off a really productive season in which he finished top 5 in MVP voting. But then you get to the rest of the room, right? You got Joey Aguilar, who you added as an undrafted free agent, Nick Mullens, who's your primary backup, and Carter Bradley, who's sitting there at QB3. Based on all reports from OTAs and mandatory minicamp, just from people who had boots on the ground, it didn't sound like the Jaguars' backup quarterbacks instilled a lot of confidence in this offense. Now, again, you have Trevor Lawrence, which is not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but kind of like insurance with anything in life, like you want to make sure you're covered, right, in case anything does go bad. Knock on wood. Now, Nick Mullens has been around the league for a good minute, right? Like he's had multiple stops in the National Football League, and he's been a fine quarterback when he's had to play. He's played in 38 games, had 66% completion. Touchdown interception ratio is about 1-to-1, which isn't great. Yards per attempt, I was actually kind of surprised it's up at 8. But as a starter, he's got a record of 5-15. So I think just to kind of put it all together that if you're Jacksonville, and this kind of has kind of a little bit of a piggyback off the Brendan Sorsby news, because while I don't think the Jaguars are ever going to seriously consider putting in a bid for Brendan Sorsby, it does make you wonder, okay, Trevor Lawrence, again, everything we hope is fine, but in the off chance that he isn't able to go or you need another quarterback to step in there, Jacksonville's kind of in a weird kind of position because I don't really have any confidence in Bradley and Mullens, and especially not Aguilar, who's just, learning the offense as an undrafted free agent based on all the things that we've heard. So that's kind of an underlying story just to kind of keep in the back of your mind that if we get into training camp and the Jaguars still are not satisfied with what they're seeing at the backup quarterback position, could they potentially look to upgrade there? We'll have to wait and see, but that's where things sit with the quarterback position. Getting into the running back room now, as not really much has changed. Now, it stinks that Chris Rodriguez has not been able to kind of get his Jaguars tenure off the ground, so to speak. He is coming off that foot surgery that he had earlier in the offseason that he suffered in a workout. He should be ready by the start of training camp, but just to speak the rest of the room, Bhayshul, Tutenor, LeQuint, Allen, and Rodriguez should be your kind of lead trio, as it were, with DJ Dallas, Jamari Taylor, and Amir Abdullah competing for RB4 just to kind of make the roster. But this is going to be your trio that's going to see the majority of the workload, and I'd really expect those kind of first two guys to be the majority of your offense in terms of your rushing attack with Rodriguez and Tutenor. Now, as we kind of previously mentioned, Rodriguez is recovering from that foot injury that he suffered earlier in the offseason program. He should be ready by the start of training camp, or at least kind of, that first little bit of training camp. So, again, not ideal that he hasn't been involved in the offseason program, but in an offense where there's opportunities, right? Like Bhayshul Tutenor is a rookie going into a second year that a lot of people expect to kind of have an increased workload, but Rodriguez is that kind of seasoned veteran that has that experience with Liam Cohen that Jaguars fans were kind of maybe sitting there wondering, okay, how much of those split workload is Rodriguez going to get? So I think it's kind of too TBD up at this point. If I had to lean one way right now, I got to go with Bhayshul Tutenor, but I think Rodriguez, just because of his size, his frame, and his ability to gain and work in short yards in the goal line, will be able to still earn a prominent role in Liam Cohen's offense. But I want to hear from you guys. Who gets more snaps? Type BT if you think it's going to be Bhayshul Tutenor. Type CR if you think it's going to be Chris Rodriguez Jr. Like I mentioned it, I'm going to type my BTs because I think Bhayshul Tutenor has put the Jaguars in a position where he's had a pretty good offseason so far, shown some explosiveness. It seems like he's understanding the offense more. So I'm going to roll with Bhayshul Tutenor. Don't count out Chris Rodriguez, though. Moving into the wide receiver room, and as of right now, I understand that there's been a lot of hype around Brian Thomas Jr., the offseason MVP, if you will. But we are going to kind of break down this wide receiver room and why I think Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, and BTJ, that's still the order for your wide receiver depth charts here in just a moment, but we would not be able to do today's show if it wasn't for our wonderful friends over at SeatGeek. Today's show is made possible by SeatGeek. Use code CHAT10 to get 10% off your next set of tickets. MLB is in full swing. The World Cup is here, and you can get tickets to all different types of sporting events on SeatGeek. The NFL is officially released, and SeatGeek is the best place to go if you want tickets to a Jaguars game this year. Now, personally, I'm going to be here at the Chat Sports Studios in Dallas, Texas, calling the Jacksonville Jaguars games. But if you guys want to see the Jaguars in person, get your tickets with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is your number one stop shop for all sporting event tickets. The Jaguars take on both the Eagles and Texans overseas in London. So even if you're an international fan, you have a chance to see the Jaguars play. But to kick off Jacksonville's season, the Jaguars take on the Cleveland Browns at home. And you can get tickets with SeatGeek for as low as $179. Whether it's a ball game, concert, or any other event, SeatGeek is the place to go as they have your back when purchasing tickets. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. Look for the green dots as they mean good, red dots mean bad. Use code CHAT10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off of any tickets with promo code CHAT10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek. All right. It's been the hype. It's been all the discussion really since, the Jaguars players were practicing availability in front of actual media members. And, you got to see Brian Thomas Jr. really, turn back the clock and look like that rookie yourself that he was so explosive and was so important to this Jaguars offense. Last year wasn't great for BTJ. And I think that, this was a big kind of turning point in BTJ's career because going into this offseason, James Gladstone, the general manager, and Liam Cohen made it clear. BTJ is a part of our plan. He's a big piece of this puzzle. He's a big part of this passing attack. And then, there was all these trade rumors. Was BTJ ever going to get traded? Were the Jaguars ever going to consider moving on from the former first-round pick from 2024? And I just never really saw it, right? Like, this guy has so much potential. You have still so much runway to see if he's going to turn into the player that you hope he will be. And based on, Trevor Lawrence saying that the chemistry has really blossomed with he and Brian Thomas Jr., I do think it's room for optimism. Now, Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers also reportedly have had really good camps, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But if we get into training camp and we continue to hear all these positive comments around Brian Thomas Jr., not only is it a really good thing for this offense, but we could see a shakeup in the wide receiver room. Right now, though, I've got him at wide receiver 3. Let me know where you guys rank him in this wide receiver room at this current moment. Moving on into the tight ends now, where I'm not going to lie, this is one of the deeper tight end rooms in the National Football League. You obviously have Britton Strange, who's your do-it-all tight end 1, who I hope he gets extended by the start of the 2026 NFL season, but I digress. Nate Borkature is your tight end 2. Tanner Koziol, I think he's made the jump over Quinn Morris at tight end number 3, and, that's really where the buck stops because Tanner Koziol, when he was drafted in the 5th round back in 2020, or in this past April's draft, I thought, most people would understand that if the Jaguars were kind of sitting there looking at him, it's like, oh, he's a red zone threat. Could he potentially fight for a roster spot? And could he fight with Quinn Morris to be that, number 3 tight end? It seems like not only has he done that, he might be in prime position to be that tight end 3 and really have a feature in this offense. I mean, last year for Houston, he was a man amongst boys there for the Cougars. 74 receptions, 727 yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, almost average 9.8 yards per catch. I mean, that's insane, almost 10 yards per catch. And I think Koziol, what really stood out so far in the offseason program is ability and his willingness to be a run blocker, which was not looked at as a strength of his coming out of Houston. If he can give you that, mentality of, being a consistent run blocker and willing to do the dirty work while also giving you that receiving upside, I mean, this gives the Jaguars a ton of options when it comes to their offense. And Liam Cohen emphasized that he wants to have kind of versatility from his tight end room to kind of open things up for Trevor Lawrence. Keep an eye on Tanner Koziol. He's going to be somebody that is going to have a feature in this offense for 2026. Moving on to the offensive line now, where, as things currently stand, I don't love that Cole Van Lanen has been essentially kind of DNPing the first part of this offseason program, but I still have him slotted in as your starting left tackle for now. Training camp could obviously change things. Anton Harrison started at your right guard position, and Robert Hainsey is there at your starting center. But the matchup that I'm personally really looking forward to watch is this kind of matchup between all 4 of these guards who I think, depending on how it goes, like, you could really make a case for any one of these 4 guys to be a starter on the Jaguars offensive line. Now, I currently have it Ezra Cleveland and Patrick McCarry, who were your starting guards at left guard and right guard, respectively. Still penciled in at stars at this current moment, but Emmanuel Pregnon, it seems like he's really picking up the offense quickly. Wyatt Milam has shown versatility and willingness to do kind of anything. So, do the Jaguars potentially look to make a pivot in their interior of the offensive line? We know how important it is for Trevor Lawrence in this passing offense to kind of have that interior run blocking. And now you're bringing in Bhayshul Tutenor and Chris Rodriguez, and you're wanting to establish that run game. Could the Jaguars make a switch at the guard position? I'm not necessarily sure, but it seems like it is going to be a fiery competition there on the interior of the offensive line. And Emmanuel Pregnon versus Patrick McCarry is going to be one matchup that I'm going to be really watching. You could easily see the former third-round pick out of Oregon maybe overtake McCarry for that starting right guard spot. All right, moving into the defensive side of the football now, as we are looking at the Jaguars' defensive line. Trayvon Walker, who just got extended this past offseason. Josh Hines Allen, the other edge opposite of him. Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton are still your main starters. At this point, it seems like they're going to keep Eric Armstead, which I didn't know if they necessarily were going to do at the start of the offseason. You did add Roka Roro, who I'm not sure is ready to step into a starting role based on his previous time in Atlanta. You did draft Albert Regis there in Jacksonville. But the big question, I think, for this defensive line and for Jaguars fans everywhere, where this defensive line generated a lot of pressures last year, but it didn't necessarily get home and didn't necessarily generate a lot of sacks. In fact, they were bottom 10 in terms of total sacks by an NFL team last year. Can you get pass rush help from your depth? You obviously drafted Wesley Williams out of Duke in the 4th round. Does Danny Strigo give you anything kind of similar to the production they gave you last year, which I thought was really good production based on kind of where you got him last year? That being said, I think this Jaguars defensive line has got a lot to prove outside of its starters, which I think are in a good position, but that youth movement in that second wave is going to be really key for this Jaguars defense. Being able to kind of repeat where they were last year, but also give you some pass rush upside. I want to hear from you guys, though. This is today's Prize Picks question of the day. Which position group are you most confident in? We just talked about a group that I'm kind of having some concerns about, but I want to get your guys' opinion on which position group you are most confident in heading into the 2026 NFL season. While you guys are answering that, I want to show you guys my Prize Picks lineup that I am rocking with for today's soccer action. Give me David there for Canada to have more than 1.5 shots. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup for Canada versus Switzerland, but give me the more on his shots. And then I got Vinicius Jr. He's got a little lightning discount on his shots at 1.5. I also think he's going to find the back of the net for Brazil. This is a little pick power play, $10 to win $35 here with our friends over at Prize Picks. And you can choose from numerous stat projections on Prize Picks, including passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, points, rebounds, assists, hits, home runs, strikeouts, and a whole lot more. The app is really easy to use. Just pick 2 or more player stats, as long as they're on 2 different teams, and you're able to lock in your lineup. And you guys can follow me on the app to see all my lineups, just like the one I just showed you at CullenBro21. New user offer. Download the Prize Picks app today with a link in the comments and the description, and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 in lineups if you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. And again, make sure you answer that pin question there, our Prize Picks question of the day, down in the comments section. All right, moving into linebackers now. A lot of question marks in the linebacker room. Not necessarily with Foye Oluokun, who kind of slides into that Mike linebacker role. He's going to be, the leader, quote-unquote, the quarterbacking of the defense. He's a veteran that's been around this league for a long time, was a part of that really productive Jaguars defense last season. I'm not really concerned with him. But what everybody is keeping their eye on is none other than Ventrell Miller, who has obviously an increased role. He's looked at to be the starting linebacker opposite of Foye Oluokun now that Devin Lloyd left in free agency. I promise you guys I won't keep mentioning that throughout the entire offseason, but it is the state of the fact that this is your guy that you're hoping that can stand up and be a key integral part of an Anthony Campanelli defense that really was predicated on its linebacker play last season, as Devin Lloyd was a second-team All-Pro for you last year. I have confidence in Miller. Jack Kaiser, does he potentially get any kind of run there? I'm sure, he'll get some special team snaps. Does he potentially work in with either Miller or Oluokun? We'll have to wait and see, but Jaguars decided to opt to go the cheaper route at linebacker. We'll see how it kind of pays off for him in 2026. Now moving into cornerback, where I know we didn't necessarily talk about it that much at wide receiver, but Travis Hunter is going to play both sides of the ball, but he is going to have an increase at the cornerback position in terms of his snap count. You got Monteric Brown still leading the way at cornerback 2. Jordan Lewis is your starting nickel. Jarian Jones. You did sign Dane Jackson in free agency that I think could fight for a roster spot. Christian Braswell, and we're going to talk about Jabbar Muhammad here in just a minute. But the anticipated return that everyone's talking about. Travis Hunter was present during the offseason program. Now, he wasn't participating in drills. He was just kind of more or less staying off to the side, you know, making sure that he was involved with the coaches, you know, being a vocal leader that he is, which is already great to see as he is still recovering from a torn LCL. Based on all reports, he's still on track to kind of return during that training camp period that James Gladstone kind of mentioned earlier in the offseason. So we'll wait to see kind of his overall progress and how he looks coming off the knee injury. But I do expect a big year for Travis Hunter, and I'm really excited to see him back out there and just overall see how the Jaguars use him during this kind of training camp / preseason period. But the talk of the cornerback room outside of Travis Hunter has really been this undrafted free agent, Jabbar Muhammad, who was mainly on the Jaguars practice squad last year, was just somebody that they got out of the University of Oregon. Wasn't really a factor for them, obviously, last year, but it seems like in every practice, there's a play that is being made by Jabbar Muhammad. And when you're talking about a Christian Braswell, when you talk about a Dane Jackson, when you talk about some of these depth cornerbacks, Jabbar Muhammad is really making it, it's going to make it hard for the Jaguars to try to leave him off this 53-man roster based on how he's played and how he's performed so far through the offseason program. Look at him as a potential roster candidate. If he can take this momentum into training camp, he could very well find himself on the Jaguars 53-man roster, which I think would be a hell of accomplishment for the former undrafted free agent. Moving into the safety room now, where you've got a really deep safety room now. We talked about it earlier in which position group you're most confident in. If you told me the Jaguars safety room is one of the rooms that you felt most confident in, I wouldn't hate it, right? You've got Eric Murray, you got Antonio Johnson, who are your two starters. Lucas penciled in right now. They're veterans. They've been there before. Antonio Johnson was a really productive Jaguar last year for Anthony Campanelli's defense, but you get Caleb Ransaw back, who didn't play last year after the foot injury that he suffered last season. You drafted Jalen Husky. Rayon Lane, I think, could be somebody that contributes not just on special teams, but if given snaps and the opportunity. Like, the Jaguars have one of the deepest safety rooms in the NFL. I think they legitimately go 4 or 5 deep, and that's something that if you're kind of looking at the NFL landscape, you see defenses sometimes present the look of being able to, use 3 safeties or maybe be able to rotate guys in and out. And, over the course of the season, wear and tear is just a natural factor of the National Football League, and where, players just kind of can go down with injury. Again, we don't wish that upon anybody, but the Jaguars really position themselves well in the safety room, and I just can't wait to see which guys stand out when it comes to training camp. Moving on to the final positional group now, as we've got the special teams depth chart. Cam Little is expected to be your kicker, with Logan Cook backing him up, or being his punter. Ross Matisic, who got a well-earned extension as your long snapper. Bhayshul Tutenor, I do have as the kick returner right now. We didn't really get any reports in terms of who's going to be kick returner, who's going to be punt returner for Jacksonville. I would also expect Parker Washington to not be the punt returner once training camp kind of rolls around. But once we kind of get reports on who can be leading the charge for that, we'll kind of update that for you. But these are who I have penciled in now, with LaQuint Allen still being a potential option for Jacksonville as well. There are also some important Jaguars dates that were announced and released that I talked about on the short. Make sure you guys are subscribed and turn on your notifications so you never miss a beat here. But just wanted to quickly run through them with you guys if you wanted to get this information. The rookies report to training camp on July 25th, with the veterans set to report on the 28th. And the Jaguars also have joint practices with all 3 preseason matchups. First at the Saints in New Orleans on August 13th. Then they have a joint practice at home versus the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the 19th and the 25th of August, just so that you're aware. But, yeah, the Jaguars having joint practices. I'm always a fan of joint practices. I think especially compared to preseason games, I actually prefer joint practices to preseason games. So if you're wanting to attend one of those are the dates for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's going to conclude this episode of the updated depth charts after mandatory minicamp. Again, we greatly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button to never miss out on anything related to your Jacksonville Jaguars. And until next time, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.